The loudest person in the room is rarely the most influential. In fact, for ambitious introverts, trying to act like an extrovert is a recipe for burnout and failure. Your brain is wired differently, and that is your secret advantage. Social intelligence isn't about talking more, it's about reading the room better than anyone else. Today, I'm giving you a science-based playbook to master leadership and social dynamics without losing your energy. Here are the 5 tools to turn your introversion into your greatest power. The introvert advantage. Why quiet observation is the foundation of high social intelligence. Quiet observation forms a durable scaffold for social insight. Introverts often rely on extensive listening and reflective appraisal before speaking, not for avoidance but for accuracy. Neuroscience hints that the prefrontal cortex lights up more during planning, self-regulation, and perspective-taking tasks for those who lean inward. This pattern isn't a flaw, it's a strength, translating to deliberate inferences, careful timing, and steadier leadership presence. The power of the pause becomes a strategic tool, giving the mind space to map intentions against observable cues. The quiet architect inside an introvert builds mental blueprints before any action. Social signals arrive as a stream of tiny cues. The social radar picks up micromovements, tone shifts, and pacing mismatches. The pace at which someone speaks, the spacing between turns, and even the breath before a statement can reveal priorities and concerns. The power of the pause lets the brain run simulations of potential outcomes before words leave the mouth. In meetings, an introvert watches for hesitation before a decision, notes who speaks most and who stays quiet, and tracks whose ideas get traction and whose get folded into the margins. This vigilance isn't suspicion, it's synthesis in real time, a quiet calibration that makes collaboration smoother. The quiet architect designs conversations the way a skilled designer shapes spaces. Before a key discussion, an introvert maps the social terrain, who holds influence, what hidden needs exist, and which voices are underrepresented. They draft questions that invite reflection rather than reaction, and they reserve space for silence as a resource rather than an awkward gap. Practical routines crystallize this approach. Observe first, then respond. Write a concise synthesis after conversations. Test assumptions with a small, diverse circle. For leadership teams, this translates into deliberate meeting structures, such as a pre-read, a short observation period, and a final summary that captures concerns from quieter members as well as bold ideas from outspoken ones. In action, the introvert-led approach centers on deliberate influence rather than loud assertion. The power of the pause makes room for others to contribute. The social radar tunes in to subtle shifts in group mood, and the prefrontal strength supports careful planning before action. One-on-one check-ins become laboratories for data gathering and relationship building, not merely status updates. A quiet leader can solicit feedback with open-ended prompts and then synthesize it into a clear, actionable path that respects both data and people. The result is influence that feels earned, not granted by volume. Yet this path requires balance. The strength of quiet observation can blur into hesitation if not paired with timely decisions and visible accountability. Practice a cadence, observe and reflect, then summarize and act. Protect space for quieter teammates, and schedule moments for public speaking that are preceded by private rehearsal. The goal is not to mute energy but to channel it with precision. By treating the prefrontal-led reflection as a craft, introverted leaders cultivate trust, clarity, and momentum. This is how the introvert advantage becomes a durable engine for high social intelligence. Tool 1. The active listening trap. How to use silence to make others reveal their true intentions. Active listening is more than hearing. It is a deliberate mode of attention that invites others to reveal what lies beneath their stated positions. The power of the pause is real. Silence becomes a receptive field where truth surfaces and confusion loosens its grip. When you create a moment of quiet after a question, you shift cognitive load onto the speaker. They must organize their thoughts, check conflicts, and decide what to disclose. The result is insight that fast talk often masks. Some researchers describe introverts as having heightened engagement of the prefrontal cortex during reflective tasks. Framed this way, silence isn't a risk but a resource. The quiet architect uses that strength to design conversations that encourage honesty without pressure. Your brain's tendency toward careful processing helps you notice inconsistencies, hesitation, and patterns others might miss in a rush. You can guide a dialogue toward candor by holding space rather than filling it. To deploy this tool effectively, start with clear intentions and a calm presence. After you ask something, resist the impulse to fill the air. Let an intentionally measured pause do the work. Use brief, Nonverbal cues, soft eye contact, a nod, an open posture, to signal you are listening and not judging. Then follow with a precise, open-ended question that invites detail. Paraphrase what you hear to validate accuracy, and then pause again briefly to see where the speaker goes next. Here are practical techniques you can practice in everyday leadership encounters. Frame the question in a way that allows nuance rather than yes or no answers. After speaking, count a slow beat of silence before responding. Mirror concise phrases the other person uses to encourage elaboration. Use a gentle reminder if the silence becomes awkward rather than crossing the line into manipulation. If the other person stalls, offer a concrete prompt that asks for examples or evidence, not defense. In real conversations, the silence you cultivate works like a diagnostic tool. In a one-on-one with a direct report, you might say, "What would make this project smoother for you?" Then wait. The delay prompts a fuller picture of blockers, priorities, and unseen pressures. The report may reveal a misaligned priority or a hidden constraint. In a negotiation, after an offer, a careful pause can expose nonverbal cues or conditional terms that would have been hidden in a rapid volley. The silence invites truth rather than bravado. The social radar is sharpened by this approach. Quiet listening makes your presence felt as a craft rather than a personality trait. It trains you to notice micro-expressions, shifts in tone, and the texture of what isn't said. It also buffers you from the urge to over-offer or over-explain. Your prefrontal strength and processing helps you hold several possibilities in mind, crafting questions that test assumptions without pressuring the other person. That balance is valuable for ambitious introverts who want influence without exhaustion. As you practice, you can measure progress by depth of disclosure and alignment between stated intent and actions. Notice when conversations start to yield more concrete commitments and fewer defensive disclaimers. Track moments when someone revises their stance after a quiet beat, rather than after a rapid rebuttal. Build a personal routine around the quiet architect approach, a few minutes of silent listening in every meeting, a post-meeting reflection on what the silence revealed, and a set of follow-up questions tailored to different personalities and contexts. Be mindful of potential pitfalls. Excessive silence can feel punitive or make others anxious, especially in cultures that prize rapid pace and expressive dialogue. Balance is essential. The goal is not to trap someone but to encourage authentic revelation at a pace that respects both minds. This approach works best when accompanied by genuine curiosity, ethical intent, and clear boundaries. When you use silence as a tool, you're not withdrawing. You're curating the space where truth can emerge. Tool 2. Low energy charisma. Mastering the presence without the performance. Introverts often engage deeper prefrontal cortex networks when processing social information, which supports deliberate thinking, self-regulation, and careful interpretation of others' cues. This neural tendency can be reframed as a strength rather than a liability, presence that is grounded in clarity, not flair. Low-energy charisma means guiding attention and trust without blasting energy into the room. It relies on authentic steadiness, not display. The power of the pause is real. The quiet architect designs conversations that invite participation without exhausting the giver or the listener. The social radar helps you notice subtle signals and respond with precision. To cultivate presence without performance, start with energy budgeting. Before a meeting, decide what you want to contribute and what would amount to enough influence. A clear objective reduces the urge to fill every moment with force. In practice, aim for 3 meaningful moves in a session: a precise question, a reflective synthesis, and a concrete next step. After you pose a question, allow a 2 to 3 second silence. Silence invites others to contribute and signals confidence in your own judgment. When you speak, be succinct and specific, not loud and broad. Short, pointed sentences land with more weight than a long monologue. Non-verbal signals matter more than you might assume. A relaxed posture with open palms communicates accessibility. A slight forward lean signals engagement without shouting for attention. Your gaze should be steady but not fixed. Acknowledge individuals by name as you address groups. Use the power of the pause to read the room, then adjust your tempo to match the energy you discover. The quiet architect approach means designing the interaction as you would a space. Predictable structure, minimal cognitive load, clear purposes. For instance, in a team update, start with a tight summary, then invite input from 2 or 3 people you know have key perspectives, rather than opening the floor to everyone at once. The social radar is essential for introverted leaders. Notice the subtle shifts in tone during a discussion. Detect when someone has a concern they're not voicing, and choose a targeted response rather than a generic reassurance. When a tense moment arises, acknowledge the tension briefly, then redirect with a concrete next step. This creates psychological safety without theatrics. Practice routines help turn presence into habit. Brief pre-meeting rehearsals focusing on core messages, not performance. Rehearse in a way that values clarity over charisma, so your words carry weight rather than volume. In leadership, trust accrues through consistency and accuracy, not loudness. Lead with a steady, intentional presence, and people will follow because they feel seen and understood, not impressed. Tool 3. The 5-minute social battery hack. How to recharge your mind during high-stakes meetings. High-stakes meetings place heavy demands on attention, working memory, and social evaluation. Introverts often show stronger engagement of the prefrontal cortex during tasks that require deliberate thinking, self-monitoring, and goal-directed control, which can be a strength when complexity rises. The power of the pause turns a moment of strain into a structured opportunity to recalibrate. The quiet architect inside you designs a small internal blueprint that preserves focus while you participate. The social radar helps you sift real signals from noise, so you aren't overwhelmed by peripheral chatter. 5 minutes can be divided into 5 micro-rituals, each with a clear purpose. First, 60 seconds of calming breathwork, such as box breathing or the 4-7-8 pattern, to lower arousal and restore steady processing. Second, 90 seconds of sensory grounding. Name 3 concrete things you see, 2 you feel, and 1 you hear. The exercise anchors attention in the present and reduces cognitive scatter. Third, 60 seconds of cognitive reframing. Soften the inner soundtrack from "I must perform perfectly" to "I will contribute thoughtfully and accurately." This shift taps into the brain's planning networks and reduces self-criticism that drains energy. Fourth, 60 seconds of external action. Jot down 2 concrete next steps you can take in the discussion, or outline a brief question to pose. This creates momentum and signals to your brain what comes next. Fifth, 60 seconds of social re-entry. Adjust your posture, relax the jaw, and offer a brief nod or a concise, purposeful comment to resync with others. The sequence adds up to a compact, repeatable routine you can rely on in the middle of a dynamic meeting. In practice, the hack feels like slipping behind the meeting's surface tempo to recalibrate. If you sense your mind fogging during a client presentation, pause for the breathwork and grounding steps while the room absorbs a point you've just made. On a video call, you can perform the same micro-actions by turning your gaze to the camera, taking a deliberate breath, and then delivering a precise, evidence-backed line that advances the argument. In a negotiation, the reframing step acts as a shield against impulsive concessions, while the action step pinpoints the non-negotiables you want to protect. You can even cue a quick microsignal with your body, shoulders relaxed, spine tall, hands resting gently, that communicates steadiness without breaking the tempo of the discussion. The quiet architect relies on small, purposeful adjustments rather than dramatic moves, preserving energy for sustained contribution. The brain's prefrontal circuitry rewards deliberate, controlled processing with clearer decision-making under pressure. Use the 5-minute battery hack as a portable instrument to manage cognitive load, not as a shortcut to skip preparation. It complements thorough agenda review, data gathering, and rehearsal. When you practice it regularly, the routine becomes second nature, a trusted tool in your leadership repertoire. The power of the pause, the quiet architect, and the social radar converge here to create space for deliberate action, even when the room hums with urgency. Tool 4. High-value questions. Why asking is more powerful than telling in professional leadership. High-value questions shift leadership conversations from directive speech toward reliable information gathering and shared sense-making. They anchor decisions in clarity rather than assumption, and they invite contributions from people who think in different ways. For ambitious introverts, this approach aligns with the brain's natural strengths: thoughtful processing, thorough exploration, and careful listening. The prefrontal cortex is the seat of planning, reflection, and social reasoning, and when questions are crafted with intention, that neural machinery becomes a productive engine. The power of the pause sweetens the effect, giving space for others to think and respond rather than filling the silence with words. A practical taxonomy helps. Clarifying questions remove ambiguity early. Probing questions dig beneath surface claims to reveal hidden premises. Reflective questions surface values, priorities, and trade-offs. Strategic questions connect the present moment to longer-term goals and resources. Open-ended forms of each type invite richer input than yes or no prompts. For example, in a product review, a clarifying question might be, what exactly does this feature deliver for the user? A probing one could be, what assumption are we making about how customers will adopt it? A reflective prompt might be, which values are guiding our priority choices right now? And a strategic inquiry could be, what changes would we need to see to consider this a viable bet for the next quarter? You can mix and match them to fit the situation without feeling confrontational. In practice, an introverted leader becomes the quiet architect when questions lead the session. Before a meeting, prepare a short chapter of questions aligned with the agenda's outcomes. During the meeting, listen more than you speak, and let the silence after a question do the heavy lifting. The social radar kicks in as you notice micro-expressions, posture shifts, or the pace of other speech, and you gently steer the line of inquiry accordingly. If a participant looks uncertain after a question, you can follow with, what would help you clarify that for the team? The goal is to cultivate psychological safety so people feel safe sharing wrong or partial answers, which is often where the best insights reside. Concrete examples make this actionable. In a cross-functional sprint, you might open with, what constraints are we operating under that we haven't acknowledged yet? Then pause. If someone reveals a hidden cost or risk, you can press kindly with, what would change if we removed or altered that constraint? Later, a reflective prompt such as, what outcome do we want the team to remember when this decision lands? Invites confirmation of shared purpose. In a one-on-one coaching conversation, try, what outcome would make you feel successful this quarter, and what would be a first small step toward it? The natural cadence, question, pause, listen, summarize, forms a rhythm that even quiet minds can sustain and, over time, expands the team's collective intelligence. Avoid common pitfalls. Questions that feel like interrogations erode trust and trigger defensiveness. Frame them with care. Attach curiosity to shared goals, not to fault. If you sense hesitation, acknowledge it briefly and reframe. I'm asking because your perspective could shift our approach for the better. Keep a running inventory of questions you've tested and observed which ones drew the most useful responses. With practice, high-value questions become second nature, not performance art. For introverts, the payoff is practical. The most powerful leadership moves often come from listening well, pausing, and asking the next precise question that moves the group forward. The social radar sharpens, and the team follows the lead of someone who chooses words that illuminate rather than command. Tool 5. Strategic visibility. How to be noticed for your results without being the center of attention. Introverts often rely on deeper processing, and neuroscience has shown that prefrontal cortex activity tends to be heightened during planning and evaluation for people with an introverted style. This pattern supports careful reasoning, thorough problem-solving, and a preference for quality over quick salience. The power of the pause becomes a strategic tool here. It lets you orchestrate timing so your results surface when they matter most, not when you happen to be the loudest. The quiet architect designs visibility as a structure you build, not a spotlight you chase. You create a lattice of visible artifacts that confirms your impact without forcing constant attention. Start by translating what you do into tangible, visible outcomes that stakeholders can quickly grasp. Map your impact to concrete deliverables and follow those with concise narratives that connect actions to business results. Build a portfolio of micro case studies and update it regularly. A single well-crafted update can travel farther than a dozen hurried conversations. For example, if a project reduces rework, publish a short before and after note that shows the problem, the actions you took, and the measurable improvement. If you redesign a process, accompany the description with a diagram or a lightweight dashboard that highlights the new workflow and the resulting efficiency gains. The key is consistency. Small, credible, repeatable artifacts that accumulate into a recognizable track record. In meetings and across team channels, lean into the social radar. Look for moments when a decision or initiative aligns with measurable outcomes you've delivered. Then contribute with precision, not volume. The power of the pause helps you craft statements that land. Speak after others have outlined the context, then offer a concise interpretation and the next steps, tying them back to real results. Frame your input as problem-solving rather than self-promotion. From the data we've collected, the next step is X, or the outcome suggests we should try Y, because it moves Z metric and aligns with our goals. The quiet architect thrives on clarity, a one-page summary before a meeting, a short post-meeting recap that includes who is responsible for what, and a clear timeline for follow-up. These practices reduce noise and increase trust in your leadership through visible reliability. Longer-term visibility is built through deliberate relationship design and sponsorship. Identify a small group of stakeholders, leaders, peers, and teams who care about the outcomes you drive, and give them consistent, digestible updates tied to their priorities. Public recognition is not about shouting. It's about anchoring your work in a shared frame. Mentor quietly, invite feedback, and offer to translate complex findings into decisions that others can own. The prefrontal-driven depth you bring translates well into mentorship, early-stage problem framing, and risk assessment, all of which are highly valued in leadership roles when paired with demonstrable results. This approach reduces the risk of invisibility and positions you as someone who quietly elevates the entire system through thoughtful, well-communicated contributions. The science of connection. Oxytocin versus adrenaline in social interactions. Oxytocin promotes trust and cooperative behavior in face-to-face interactions, especially when the other person is perceived as a safe partner. Adrenaline, the body's fast-acting arousal hormone, sharpens attention and reaction speed for social evaluation, but it can also heighten anxiety and narrow focus if arousal becomes excessive. In real conversations, the two chemicals pull in different directions. Oxytocin invites warmth and collaboration, while adrenaline signals vigilance and readiness. The result is a dynamic rhythm that every ambitious introvert can learn to choreograph. Introverts often rely on the prefrontal cortex for planning, self-regulation, and nuanced interpretation of social cues. This neural pattern can translate into a deliberate, thoughtful style of engagement that others experience as calm competence. The quiet architect uses this strength to anticipate questions, frame ideas clearly, and pace exchanges to avoid overwhelming the other person. When a leader leans into this, small, intentional moments, one-on-one check-ins, precise questions, and well-timed summaries become signals of reliability rather than fatigue. The power of the pause is a practical tool. Pauses give oxytocin a chance to strengthen social trust by allowing alignment of intention and meaning in the moment. A deliberate silence after a question invites the listener to contribute and signals respect. The social radar helps you read subtle cues, micro-expressions, shifts in posture, tonal changes, that indicate whether your audience feels connected or stretched. Together, these concepts turn social interactions into a controlled process rather than a chaotic sprint. For an introverted leader, pauses transform potential adrenaline spikes into focused energy aimed at connection rather than performance anxiety. In practice, you can weave these ideas into everyday leadership rituals. Start meetings with a brief, intimate check-in rather than diving straight into agendas. Ask open-ended questions that invite reflection and curiosity, then mirror and label emotions to validate the other person's experience. Slow your speaking pace, use a warm but even tone, and give the other person space to respond. If you notice tension rising, breathe with a steady inhalation and a longer exhale to rebalance your arousal and invite a calmer, more collaborative tone. Pairing one-on-one conversations with a clear follow-up plan creates reliability and trust, which in turn fosters oxytocin-linked bonding even in high-stakes contexts. The aim is not to suppress adrenaline, but to channel it into decisive action that strengthens relationships. The result is a leadership style where the quiet mind becomes a powerful catalyst for collective achievement. Practical exercise. The observation audit for your next social event. The observation audit reframes a social event as a field study rather than a string of random exchanges. You collect data on who starts conversations, how topics shift, when energy rises or falters, and how your own responses unfold. Introverts often show heightened activity in the prefrontal cortex during social processing, which supports careful planning, self-monitoring, and nuanced listening. That pattern becomes a strength you can consciously deploy. The power of the pause becomes a reliable tool for gathering data and shaping deliberate next steps rather than rushing in. Before you go, set 3 clear objectives for the event. Identify who tends to lead, observe how turn-taking unfolds, and notice moments when energy spikes or slides. Create a compact audit template you can fill in quickly, with fields like context, cues, inference, and action. The quiet architect mindset matters here. Choose seating or positioning that lets you observe without draining your energy, and decide when to stay on the periphery so you can watch without feeling obliged to perform. During the event, practice the social radar by scanning for clusters, noting who commands attention, who listens, who interrupts, and who speaks in a quiet but persistent way. Record a handful of quick notes after exchanges to keep your memory fresh, focusing on patterns rather than isolated anecdotes. Concrete examples anchor the practice. If you notice a participant who dominates with rapid-fire questions and then shifts topics, respond with a calm summary and an invitation that draws others in, such as, "That point raises a few perspectives. How about we hear from someone who hasn't spoken yet? If a conversation stalls, insert a deliberate pause and invite a quieter voice with a direct question like, "What's your take on this?" Your notes might read, observation, dominant speaker, energy high but listening low. Inference, opportunity to rebalance conversation. Action, pose a rotating question to include others. Follow-up, send a brief note to the group proposing a short, inclusive discussion in the next gathering. The audit is not merely recording, it's practice in shaping social dynamics with intention. After the event, sit with your notes and translate them into action steps you can execute next time. The audit becomes a leadership toolkit when you label each observation with a concrete move. Invite, summarize, defer, or pose a clarifying question. A practical template helps. Create columns for observation, pattern, insight, action, and follow-up. For instance, you might record observation, energy spikes when topic is broad, action, steer to a specific example and invite others to weigh in. Your prefrontal planning supports you here by allowing you to map complex social patterns into repeatable tactics. The goal is to convert quiet reflection into reliable, scalable influence. One well-timed pause, one thoughtful question, one inclusive invitation at a time. Influence is a skill, not a personality trait. Master it. Influence is a skill grounded in repeatable practices rather than a fixed personality. Some neuroimaging studies show that introverts recruit prefrontal cortex regions more when processing complex information or regulating arousal, a pattern that maps onto careful planning and measured conversations. That pattern becomes a leadership advantage when paired with deliberate routines. The power of the pause demonstrates how slowing the pace invites more voices, sharpens decisions, and reduces costly misreads. The quiet architect frames leadership as building safe structures, clear agendas, transparent decisions, reliable follow-through. Influence, then, is something you build, not something you merely inherit. Before a meeting, define 2 or 3 concrete outcomes and publish a short pre-read. That simple frame turns you into a facilitator rather than a mere participant. During the session, use pauses after questions to invite input and give silent thinkers room to contribute. Paraphrase what you heard to confirm shared understanding and surface hidden assumptions. Ask one well-framed question that targets risk, evidence, or trade-offs. Document decisions in a concise post-meeting log so action follows communication. In a product review, you might ask, what is the top risk and what evidence supports this? And then invite quick alternatives. The social radar helps you sense engagement, energy, and clarity in the room. If attention drifts, pivot toward concrete statements, even when you prefer nuance. Keep your nonverbal signals calibrated. Open posture, eye contact that catches but does not chase, and a steady, calm tone. When you lead cross-functional work, replace long monologues with focused updates and a clear Q&A. That is how introverted leadership scales influence without shouting. Mastery is ongoing, built through deliberate practice and honest feedback. Try one micro-habit today. Ask one precise question in every meeting. Tomorrow, send a 60-second recap email that records decisions, owners, and timelines. Over time, your influence appears as consistent trust, not a sudden spark. The power of the pause, the quiet architect, and the social radar become your reliable toolkit. If you've stuck with this video to the end, you're already proving that depth and impact can go hand in hand for ambitious introverts. The power of the pause is your quiet superpower. You listen, you think, and you time your words so your contributions land with clarity and credibility. The quiet architect shows up in how you design conversations, write messages, and set agendas, creating spaces where energy is conserved and outcomes are amplified. The social radar is your ability to sense room dynamics, read subtle cues, and adapt with calm precision. And beneath it all, your brain often engages the prefrontal cortex more vividly during social tasks, fueling planning, reflection, and measured leadership. See that not as a hurdle but as a resource you can deploy intentionally. Here are the core takeaways, without the noise. First, the power of the pause teaches you to slow down the impulse to talk, using listening and calibrated timing to gain influence. Second, the quiet architect reminds you to design interactions, whether in a meeting, a message, or a network moment, so your quiet energy works for you, not against you. Third, the social radar invites you to notice room signals, adjust energy levels, and respond with precision rather than speed. Fourth, your prefrontal cortex advantage is a strength you can harness for strategic thinking, ethical decisions, and deep empathy. Fifth, practical micro-habits, like a 60-second pre-meeting plan, one open-ended question to anchor conversation, and a concise post-meeting recap turn science into daily leadership practice. If these ideas spark something in you, try one micro-habit this week and notice what shifts in your interactions. I'd love to hear what you try in the comments, and if you enjoyed this science-based playbook, consider subscribing for more insights. Looking ahead, we'll dive into scripts for networking, conflict navigation, mentoring quiet talent, and building inclusive meetings that honor quiet voices. Your influence grows not by shouting, but by shaping, listening, and acting with intention. The quiet architect's path to making big things happen.